After a tragic accident, Scumbag Millionaire chooses his pregnant wife and dumps his mistress. Victor Langford seemed to have it all, an empire of wealth built from humble beginnings, a marriage lauded by society pages, and a status as one of New York's most influential power players. Yet behind the glittering facade lay a secret that threatened to unravel his carefully crafted world. One fateful evening, a violent car crash shattered not only Victor's prized Maserati, but also the illusions he'd clung to, forcing him to confront a devastating choice between the devoted wife who had walked every step with him and the mistress whose promise of excitement once felt impossible. Victor Langford's ascent to millionaire status was the stuff of legend. Born in a small town in Ohio, he'd once been just another kid in a working-class family living paycheck to paycheck. But from a young age, Victor knew he wanted more, much more. After earning a scholarship to Columbia University in New York, he graduated with a degree in business and immediately plunged into the world of finance. One savvy investment after another eventually landed him a seat among the city's most influential power players. By the age of 35, Victor was making headlines in the New York Times for his aggressive takeovers and fearless market maneuvers. Fortune magazine dubbed him the rising shark, an epithet he wore like a badge of honor. With his net worth soaring past $100 million, Victor wasn't just wealthy, he was unstoppable. Amid the non-stop business deals and high-stakes negotiations, there was another bright spot in Victor's life, his wife, Helena Ward Langford. They had met at a charity gala in Manhattan. Helena, a humanitarian at heart, worked for an international non-profit that provided schooling for girls in developing countries. Where Victor's eyes glinted with ambition, Helena's shone with compassion. The contrast was magnetic. They married at the Plaza Hotel, throwing a sumptuous reception that landed in the society pages for weeks. In public, they seemed an enviable duo. Victor, the brilliant financial mogul, Helena, the elegant philanthropist. Their home, a 2-floor penthouse overlooking Central Park, reflected their combined success and good taste. Designer furniture from Italy, original art from emerging painters, and floor-to-ceiling windows capturing the Manhattan skyline lent a glow of opulence. Friends and reporters alike marveled at the fairy tale marriage, convinced they were witnessing a modern-day version of old-world glamour. Behind the scenes, however, shadows had begun to gather. Helena still adored Victor, but couldn't shake the feeling that his time and energy were increasingly consumed by something outside their union. The endless nights he spent at business dinners, the text messages he'd hurriedly hide these, didn't align with the man she thought she knew. But every time she tried to voice her unease, Victor would wave it off with a dismissive grin. He had a knack for making her doubts seem trivial. Still, Helena was no fool. She could read the lines between his vague alibis, but she chose, for the time being, to trust that her husband's occasional aloofness was just a byproduct of work stress. She had faith that once his business ventures stabilized, he'd return to the sweet man who once spontaneously whisked her away on a private jet to Turks and Caicos just because she needed a break. Meanwhile, Victor reveled in his high-rolling lifestyle. He inhabited a world where deals were closed over $600 bottles of wine at Le Bernardin, and where acquaintances bragged about the brand-new Ferraris they'd bought on a whim. It was in these exclusive circles that Victor met Miranda Klein, a raven-haired marketing executive with wit as sharp as her designer stilettos. Their first encounter was at a weekend conference in Miami. Victor spotted her at a networking mixer where she mingled among top-tier investors. She was confident, bold, and exuded a sensuality that instantly drew him in. Over mojitos under the neon lights, a connection flared. Miranda wasn't shy about her intentions. The flicker in her eyes told him she recognized a kindred spirit, someone as hungry for excitement as she was. That night, they exchanged phone numbers under the pretense of business synergy. Within weeks, they'd begun an affair that would eventually threaten the foundation of Victor's marriage. To onlookers, the Langfords' life still sparkled. Helena continued her charitable work, traveling to remote parts of the globe for fundraising projects. Victor juggled corporate boards and philanthropic committees, smiling dutifully for cameras. Yet behind that winning smile, he was orchestrating stolen afternoons with Miranda, telling himself Helena would never find out. For Victor, this was the apex of existence, the wife who was a perfect blend of grace and kindness, and the mistress who offered an intoxicating, adrenaline-fueled escape. He considered himself invincible, but fate has a way of humbling those who think they stand untouchable. The seeds of his downfall were quietly sprouting, and no amount of money or charm could protect him from what was coming. Miranda Klein was no stranger to ambition. Raised in Atlanta by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, Miranda learned early on that beauty, cunning, and opportunism could serve as potent currencies in a world ruled by men with power. She'd landed a scholarship to a prestigious private high school where she honed her social finesse, excelling in debate and drama. Later, she studied marketing at a reputable Southern university, her classroom success overshadowed by her knack for weaving elaborate social networks. By her mid-20s, Miranda had leveraged her connections to secure a plush position at a major marketing firm in Chicago, but the city felt too small, its opportunities limited. So when a job offer emerged in New York, a global campaign manager role for a high-profile beverage company, she didn't hesitate. Manhattan called to her the way a stage calls an actress. She yearned for the bright lights, the swirling energy, the promise of unlimited heights. Standing nearly 6 feet tall in her heels, Miranda radiated an aura of confidence. Her trademark black hair, cut into a sleek bob, framed a face that could shift from playful to intimidating in a heartbeat. At corporate events, she glided through the crowd with the poise of someone who knew exactly how to collect the right business cards and lock eyes with the right people. So it was only a matter of time before Miranda encountered Victor Langford. She knew of him. Of course, he was on the covers of business magazines, listed among the city's top power brokers under 40. When she walked into that Miami networking mixer, she spotted him almost immediately. Sharp charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, tie undone just enough to signal confidence. He exuded magnetism, the sort that draws moths to a flame. She let him approach, feigning a cool aloofness while finishing her mojito. Their conversation started as typical corporate small-talk stock performance, upcoming IPOs, the speaker lineup at the conference. But the undertones shifted quickly. When Victor mentioned his busy schedule in New York, Miranda's eyes glinted with intrigue. She played her part skillfully, exclaiming how she, too, worked in Manhattan and would love to compare strategies sometime. Within 2 hours, they'd moved from the mixer to a more exclusive after-party, and from polite banter to heated flirtation. Miranda recognized the signs. Victor was not simply making polite conversation. He was engaging in a subtle dance of seduction, testing her boundaries, gauging her interest. She accepted his invitation to a private dinner the following night, fully aware that she was stepping into a complicated realm. Men like Victor never come without baggage. After returning to New York, Miranda found her phone buzzing with text messages from Victor at odd hours. He'd start with questions about marketing strategies, but the conversation would always slip into more personal territory. Soon, they were meeting clandestinely cocktails at hidden speakeasies, business lunches that stretched into late afternoons. Miranda had never considered herself someone's mistress, but she also didn't shy away from the perks. Victor spared no expense. Expensive jewelry gifts arrived at her penthouse door. Luxury weekend getaways under the pretext of work conferences became routine. At times, Miranda's rational mind would flicker with guilt, knowing that behind Victor's broad shoulders stood a wife who believed in him. But the promise of sharing a slice of his extravagant lifestyle dulled those moral pangs. She told herself that if Victor was stepping away from his marriage, it wasn't her fault, it was his choice. A glimmer of rationalization that allowed her to keep dancing with him on the edge of scandal. The deeper they fell into each other's orbit, the more Miranda savored her position. She was never one for modest aspirations. To her, life was a game of strategy, and if she played her cards right, perhaps she could become more than just a side affair. She had daydreams of being at Victor's side in the penthouse, traveling the globe on a private jet, forging her own empire with his resources. So she played the part of the exciting confidant, the one who never judged him and never questioned the hours he had to vanish to maintain appearances. Little did they know that fate was about to rearrange the board in a catastrophic way. While Miranda imagined climbing higher by riding Victor's coattails, the universe had a different script in mind, one that would force Victor to question every life decision he'd made. Helena Langford was far from the clueless wife that popular stories often depict. Her philanthropic work took her abroad frequently, but she was acutely aware of her husband's temperament. When Victor began to be more evasive than usual, missing dinner appointments he once cherished, she took notice. She'd watch him slip out of their penthouse late at night on the flimsiest of excuses, an urgent call from a client in Asia, a last-minute meeting with a West Coast investor. The explanations, while plausible, left a bitter aftertaste she couldn't ignore. The transformation in Victor was subtle but telling. He no longer bothered to ask about her humanitarian missions with genuine curiosity. Where he once teased her about saving the world, he now simply nodded, eyes glassy, mind somewhere else. Their once joyful Sunday tradition brunch at Balthazar in Soho, followed by a leisurely stroll, ceased without any discussion. Helene felt the shift like a crack in glass. Eventually, Helena took the direct route. One chilly morning, as Victor was preparing to dash off for a meeting, she cornered him in their expansive marble foyer. "Victor," she said, her voice steady, "we need to talk. I'm worried about us." His reaction was predictable. He glanced at his watch, feigning annoyance. "Honey, I'm late. We'll talk tonight, I promise." But Helena refused to step aside. "We haven't talked in weeks. Truly talked. Is there something you want to tell me?" He avoided her gaze, letting out a long sigh. "Work's piling up, Helena. Deals are bigger, stakes are higher. That's all." She studied his face for any hint of sincerity. "You're lying." The bluntness hung in the air. Victor's expression hardened, eyes flickering with panic. She'd never confronted him so directly before, but in typical Victor style, he brushed past her. "I'll call you later," he mumbled before shutting the door. For Helena, that moment confirmed her deepest suspicion. There was another woman. She wanted to dismiss the notion as paranoia, but the evidence, late-night texts, secretive phone calls, the intangible distance was growing impossible to refute. She even once caught a glimpse of a receipt for a 5-star dinner at Daniel on a night he claimed to be working late alone. 2 dinner entrees on the bill. No mention of a business partner or colleague. Helena felt torn between wanting to gather proof and wanting to preserve whatever remained of her dignity. She confided in her closest friend, Camille, who listened with a sympathetic ear. "You need to confront him head-on," Camille urged, "but be prepared for what you'll find." "It might not be easy." Nodding, Helena admitted she was scared. Part of her worried that if she confirmed the existence of a mistress, her marriage would be irreparably broken. She loved Victor, warts and all, She still remembered the sweet man who spontaneously donated $500,000 to her non-profit's new school-building campaign in Ghana, just because he saw how passionate she was about it. But this new version of him, a man who seemed to slip away at the faintest beep of his phone, was like a stranger wearing her husband's face. While Helena steeled herself for an inevitable confrontation, Victor was living out his double life with mounting audacity. He and Miranda ventured to exclusive clubs, popped into pricey boutique openings in Soho, and even flew to LA for a weekend under the guise of scouting real estate opportunities. Each lie he spun to Helena felt easier to deliver, as though he was slipping into the role of a carefree bachelor. In quieter moments, a pang of guilt would gnaw at him, but he suppressed it by telling himself his wife would never truly understand the rush that fueled his success. Yet even as Victor indulged in illusions of invincibility, the tension around him crackled. Helena's intuition sharpened daily, and Miranda, for her part, began hinting about wanting more than just stolen weekends. She coveted the spotlight of being officially by Victor's side. "I'm not just here for fun," she told him one evening, her voice laced with steely ambition. All these pressures formed a boiling pot of conflict. The question wasn't if it would spill over, but when. And the catalyst was about to strike in the most dramatic way possible on a dark road, in the roar of screeching tires, revealing the fragility of life and forcing a decision that would upend their fates. Life has a cruel sense of timing. It was on a Thursday evening, where the wind whipped cold rain against Manhattan's steel and glass towers, that Victor found himself in the center of a tempest destined to change everything. He had spent the day in a swirl of meetings, closing a lucrative investment deal. In celebration, he decided to take Miranda to an opulent dinner at the Polo Bar, where they dined on premium steaks and vintage champagne. Oblivious to the irony, they chatted about an upcoming weekend trip to Aspen, which Miranda was keen on. "We can stay at the Street Regis," she cooed. "Just you and me. No distractions." As they left the restaurant, the rain had intensified, flooding the gutters and making the city's traffic a snarl. Ever impatient, Victor dismissed Miranda's idea of calling a car service. He insisted on driving his sleek, black Maserati. He liked to feel the power of the engine, the thrill of controlling something so beautiful. The valet handed him the keys with a polite smile and a caution. "Roads are pretty slick tonight, sir." Victor smirked, always confident in his abilities. Miranda slid into the passenger seat, her stiletto heels skidding on the wet pavement. With a roar of the engine, they were off, weaving between taxis and sluggish SUVs. A sense of invulnerability enveloped them. Miranda cranked up the stereo, letting pop music thump through the speakers as the city lights blurred in the downpour. Neither noticed Helena, who stood under the awning of a nearby building, heart twisted in disbelief. She had recognized the Maserati from afar. The custom license plate made it unmistakable. She watched in shock as her husband drove past her with another woman in the passenger seat. Their silhouettes were clear, even in the stormy gloom. It felt like a knife twisting in her chest. This was the confirmation she dreaded, handed to her in a moment of raw clarity. Helena, numb with pain, hailed a taxi and asked the driver to follow the Maserati at a distance. She didn't know what she planned to do: confront them? Scream? Break down in tears? She only knew she had to see this through. The pursuit took them out of the denser parts of Midtown toward a less congested stretch of highway. The rain hammered harder, transforming the roads into mirrored surfaces. Streetlights glowed in hazy circles, and visibility plummeted. Helena's taxi driver gripped the wheel, cursing the weather under his breath. Still, she kept her eyes locked on that black sports car up ahead. Victor, meanwhile, was oblivious. He was laughing at something Miranda said, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. The adrenaline of the deal and the luxurious dinner coursed through his veins. He pressed the accelerator, accelerating to a dangerous speed. Miranda placed a hand on his thigh, encouraging him to slow down, but her voice melted into the music. Then it happened. A truck up ahead merged into their lane without signaling. Victor swerved to avoid a collision. The Maserati's tires lost their grip on the waterlogged asphalt. For a split second, time dilated, and Victor's heart lurched in his chest. The car fishtailed, spun sideways, and slammed into a guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. The driver's side airbag deployed, smashing into Victor's face with stunning force. Miranda's scream cut through the air like a razor. Helena's taxi screeched to a halt behind them, the driver hurling a string of expletives. Shaking, Helena thrust open the door and rushed out into the sheets of rain. The twisted wreck of the Maserati was still smoking, its front end crumpled like a tin can. Victor's head rested against the deployed airbag, unconscious. Miranda was conscious but trapped, frantically shouting for help. Without a moment's hesitation, Helena dialed 911. Though her heart raged with betrayal, her instincts commanded compassion. She called out to Miranda, "I've called an ambulance, help is on the way." For a moment, the two women's eyes locked. There was no hiding the truth now, the mistress and the wife thrown together in the worst possible scenario. Minutes later, sirens pierced the downpour. Firefighters pried open the mangled car. First responders carefully extracted Victor and Miranda, both battered but alive. Helena stood drenched, tears mingling with rain, feeling as though her world had shattered along with the Maserati's glass. In the swirl of flashing lights and paramedics, Helena followed the ambulance in another taxi, refusing to abandon Victor even now. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she sensed it would be the day everything changed forever. The ambulance rushed Victor and Miranda to Mount Sinai Hospital, sirens wailing through the storm-drenched streets. Helena trailed close behind in the taxi, heart pounding like a drum. The driver cast sympathetic glances at her in the rearview mirror. The shock of discovering her husband's betrayal and then witnessing his crash had left her numb, functioning on autopilot. As soon as she arrived, Helena dashed into the emergency room. The buzz of doctors, nurses, and the pungent smell of antiseptics assaulted her senses. She hurried to the reception desk. "Victor Langford," she said, her voice trembling. "He was just brought in from a car accident." The nurse, noticing Helena's shaking form, offered a chair and promised to find out more. Minutes felt like hours. Helena's thoughts churned. She replayed the horrifying image of the mangled Maserati, of Miranda's panicked face. A swirl of emotions crashed inside her: anger, fear, betrayal, and an odd sense of protective concern for Victor. She didn't know if he was stable, if he'd wake up. Despite her fury, she realized with a pang that she wasn't ready to lose him. Eventually, a doctor emerged, scanning the waiting area. "Mrs. Langford?" he asked, stepping toward her. She rose abruptly, heart in her throat. "Your husband sustained a significant head injury and some internal bruising. We're doing a CT scan to check for cranial or internal bleeding." He hesitated, gauging her reaction. "He's unconscious but stable for now. We'll know more in a few hours." Helena's knees wobbled. "Can I see him?" she managed. The doctor nodded. "He's being transferred to a private room in ICU. A nurse will let you in soon." Relief battled anxiety within her. She thanked the doctor, tears blurring her vision. But there was someone else in the hospital, Miranda. Helena didn't want to see her, let alone speak to her, but a collision of circumstances forced them into the same orbit. Miranda, whose injuries were less severe, was being wheeled to a nearby gurney in the hallway. Their eyes met in a charged moment of forced reckoning. Miranda looked haggard. Blood stained her blouse near the shoulder, and her hair was matted with rainwater and sweat. "Helena," she began, voice cracking. Helena swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if she had the strength or the desire to speak, but pity and perhaps a flicker of responsibility made her step closer. Miranda's eyes darted around. He lost control. I begged him to slow down. I never wanted, she broke off, tears carving paths down her cheeks. Her usual composure was nowhere to be found. Helena's voice was cold. You're telling me you had no part in this? You played along with his lies, and now look at where we are. She glared at Miranda's tear-streaked face, uncertain whether to direct her rage or sympathy. Stay away from me, she finally said, turning away. Despite her resolution, a pang of empathy cut through her. Helena recalled the panic in Miranda's voice at the crash site. She realized how life can upend illusions in an instant, leaving raw, painful truths. But for now, Helena's focus was on Victor, her husband, the man who'd lied to her, yet the man she still cared for. A nurse appeared, guiding Helena through a maze of corridors to the ICU. She stepped into a small, sterile room where Victor lay attached to monitors. His face was bruised, a bandage circling his temple. The hiss of oxygen and the beeping machines felt surreal. Helena approached, her heart heavy. She traced a gentle hand over his forearm. She wondered if he could sense her presence, if he even wanted her here after all he had done. Hours ticked by. Doctors came and went, adjusting the fourth drips, examining scans. Helena fielded calls from Victor's business associates and from family members, delivering updates in a detached, calm tone. She refused to leave his side, even though a swirl of conflicting emotions raged within her. She would let him wake up and face the consequences. She wanted answers, wanted him to explain why he risked everything for some fleeting thrill. Around dawn, after a barrage of medical checks, a doctor informed her that Victor would likely regain consciousness within the next 24 hours. He's fortunate, the doctor said. It could have been much worse. Helena thanked him, slumping into a bedside chair, exhaustion pressing down on her. She gazed at Victor's ashen face. She thought about the road that led them here, the opulent dinners, the suspicious receipts, the swirling rumors. And now, ironically, it was in the hushed corridors of a hospital that all secrets lay bare. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and exhaled. A single question echoed in her mind. If he survives, and the doctors said he likely would he choose her? Or the mistress she'd finally met under such tragic circumstances? By midday, Victor still lay in a deep, medicated sleep. Nurses bustled in and out of his ICU room, offering Helena encouraging words, but she felt none of their optimism. The emotional bruises cut deep, and she couldn't shake the image of Victor behind the wheel, a woman who wasn't her by his side. The hospital's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Helena had dozed off in the chair by Victor's bed, lulled by the steady beep of the heart monitor. Then a polite cough jolted her awake. She blinked, adjusting to the bright lights. Standing at the doorway was Miranda, her left arm in a sling. Bandages marred her forehead, and a haunted look clung to her eyes. Helena's body tensed. "What are you doing here?" Miranda glanced at Victor's unconscious form, her gaze filled with conflicting emotions. "I wanted to see if he was okay." Helena stood, lips pressed into a thin line. "He's stable, according to the doctors. That's all you need to know." Miranda hesitated, stepping closer. "Please, Helena. You have every right to hate me, but I do care about Victor. I just need to know he'll recover." The bitterness in Helena's throat tasted like poison. She longed to lash out, to scream about betrayal, but something in Miranda's trembling voice gave her pause. She took a moment to gather her composure. "The doctors say he'll survive. I assume you got the same news." Miranda bowed her head. "They discharged me from the ER with minor injuries. I couldn't leave without making sure he was." She paused, tears welling up. "He means a lot to me." Helena's anger flared again. "He's my husband," she said, voice trembling. I'm the one who took vows with him. I'm the one who's been at his side, not just in wealth, but also through tough times. So don't stand there and talk about how he means so much to you." An uncomfortable silence filled the room, broken only by the monitor's steady beeping. Miranda's eyes locked onto Victor's hand, lying motionless on the bed. "I never planned this," she whispered. "I didn't seek out a married man, it just happened." Helena exhaled sharply. "That's a convenient excuse. But let's not pretend you didn't know he was married." Miranda closed her eyes, unable to form a rebuttal. She knew it was true. She'd made choices, and now all those choices came crashing down. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked meekly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can leave," Helena replied firmly. "He'll see you, if he wants to, after he wakes up. But for now, I won't let you stand here and pretend you're family." Miranda opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, aware that any justification would be futile. She gave Victor one final, lingering look before stepping out. The hush she left behind was heavier than before. Helena sank back into the chair, her anger receding, replaced by a heavy weariness. She couldn't fathom how her life had spiraled into this painful melodrama. Once again, she gazed at Victor, trying to reconcile the man she fell in love with and the man who betrayed her trust so thoroughly. By late afternoon, the doctor reappeared. "Miss S. Langford, your husband's scans look good. He might regain consciousness soon, and we'll know more about his cognitive state." He offered a reassuring nod, then moved on. As if on cue, Victor's eyelids fluttered a couple of hours later. Helena was at his bedside, her heart pounding. Gradually he stirred, a moan escaping his lips. The swirl of confusion played across his face. "Victor," Helena called softly, leaning forward. "You're in Mount Sinai. You had a car accident." His gaze was unfocused, flicking around as though piecing together fragments of a puzzle. Helena," he muttered, voice raspy. "What happened?" Her chest tightened. This was the moment she had both feared and awaited. Would he realize what he'd done? Would he feel remorse? She reached out, lacing her fingers through his. "You were driving in the storm. You lost control. Miranda was with you." The name Miranda sparked a ripple of shock in his expression, followed by something that looked like shame. He tried to lift his head, but a searing pain shot through him, and he groaned, slumping back. Is she okay?" Helena drew her hand away. The question was like a knife to her heart. "She has minor injuries. She's fine. I've been here, watching over you." Slowly, reality seeped into Victor's consciousness. He gazed at Helena, tears glistening in his eyes. "I thank you. I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. In that moment, he seemed frail, no longer the titan of business, but a man whose entire world had crumbled. Helena swallowed, tears of her own threatening. This was just the start of a reckoning that wouldn't be resolved with a few apologies. She nodded silently and stayed by his side, grappling with the swirl of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Outside the window, the storm had passed, leaving behind a stark grey light. Somewhere in this hospital, Miranda nursed her own regrets. And somewhere deeper, a cosmic sense of justice began to stir, preparing to deliver consequences that none of them could imagine. After regaining consciousness, Victor lingered in Mount Sinai Hospital for several days. The doctors wanted to monitor him closely, concerned about potential head trauma. Meanwhile, Helena rarely left his side, though a tension brewed between them that even the sanitized hospital air couldn't dissipate. She was there out of concern and loyalty, but also out of a yearning for answers. On the second day of his convalescence, Victor convinced Helena to help him walk down the hallway, and the fourth stand trailing behind him. Every step felt laborious, pain shooting through his ribs, but he insisted he needed to move, to think. As they passed vacant waiting areas and humming vending machines, Helena finally spoke. "Why, Victor? You had everything. A home, a marriage, a life filled with possibilities. Why risk it all? He paused, leaning against the wall to catch his breath, sweat beading on his forehead. I was seduced by the excitement, he admitted, voice quavering. Everything was easy for me, Helena. Money, success. I wanted more. I wanted to feel invincible. She studied him with pained eyes. Is that all our marriage was? A stepping stone to success? Where did love figure in this? It wasn't like that, he protested, wincing. I do love you. I always have. But I got lost. And then Miranda happened, and she made me feel powerful in a different way. Helena's heart twisted. So this is my fault for not making you feel powerful enough? His eyes flickered with regret. No, don't twist it. This is on me. I betrayed you. I can't undo that, but I can. I can try to fix what's left. She studied his haggard face. The conflict within her raged, but she saw a sincerity in his eyes that gave her pause. I don't know if this is fixable, Victor, she whispered, tears threatening. You gave her, Miranda, a part of your life that should have been ours. She guided him back to his room. By the time they returned, Victor was trembling from the exertion. The nurse frowned but said nothing, helping him back into bed. Once Helena settled into the bedside chair, he clasped her hand, ignoring the flicker of pain it caused him. Do you remember our first anniversary in Venice? He asked, voice soft. How we sat by the Grand Canal at sunset. I told you I'd love you for the rest of my life. Her throat tightened. That memory was etched in her heart. The golden light on the water, the laughter they shared. I remember, she managed. This accident, Victor paused, struggling for composure. It made me see how easily life can end. I don't want to die with regrets. I'm choosing you, Helena. If you'll still have me, she let out a shaky breath. That choice is not so simple. There's damage, emotional damage. I know, he said, tears forming in his eyes, but I'll do whatever it takes. They were interrupted by a light knock on the door. Helena turned to see Miranda standing there, despite having been told to keep her distance. She still wore her arm in a sling. Victor's face hardened, guilt mingling with discomfort. I'm leaving New York, Miranda said quietly, eyes darting between them. I just came to say goodbye. I never wanted any of this to happen. Helena's jaw clenched, while Victor shut his eyes, pained. Miranda, he began, voice tense. I'm sorry for everything, but Helena is my wife. I need to make things right. A flash of hurt crossed Miranda's features. Perhaps she expected a gentler dismissal. She nodded stiffly, tears threatening to spill. Understood. She swallowed. I do love you, Victor, but I see now you have your choice. Turning to Helena, she managed a timid apology. I'm sorry. Helena didn't respond, unsure what to say. Part of her wanted to hurl anger at Miranda, but another part recognized the woman's own heartbreak. Instead, she looked away, letting the silence speak volumes. Miranda left. Victor and Helena were alone again, grappling with the rawness of a chapter they never foresaw. The emotional rubble of betrayal, guilt, and heartbreak littered the landscape of their relationship. Yet, for the first time in a long while, the air felt strangely clear. The mistress was gone, and the once invincible Victor had made his choice. Now came the question of whether Helena had enough will and enough love left to rebuild something new from the wreckage. Victor's slow recovery gave him ample time to reflect. The hospital walls felt both confining and strangely comforting. This was a space where he couldn't run, couldn't hide. Each day, he tried walking a bit farther along the corridor, forcing his body to regain strength. In the quiet hours, he found himself haunted by nightmares of screeching tires, shattered glass, and Helena's tear-streaked face. Helena, meanwhile, balanced her sense of duty with her battered heart. She spent long hours at Victor's bedside, reading to him or quietly handling his business affairs when necessary. Whenever she looked at him, she felt a swirl of contradictory emotions: anger, love, pity, hurt. Rebuilding trust was no simple feat. While Victor's apology sounded heartfelt, she knew words were not enough. She needed actions, consistency, and perhaps time to let the sting of betrayal fade. As the days wore on, Helena observed an unfamiliar tenderness in Victor. He no longer took phone calls at odd hours, nor did he bark orders at his staff. Instead, he politely asked Helena to text his associates about rescheduling deals, deferring to her input. He no longer exuded that alpha confidence. Perhaps near-death experiences can humble a person, or maybe the weight of guilt had cracked his facade. Either way, Helena couldn't deny that something in him had fundamentally shifted. In quiet moments, they'd share stories about simpler times, their early courtship, favorite vacations, even Helena's non-profit missions that Victor rarely inquired about before. They laughed, albeit haltingly, at the memory of the time Victor had tried to impress her by cooking a fancy pasta dish and nearly set off the penthouse's sprinkler system. These shared moments felt like tender bridges spanning a gaping chasm, yet a new threat loomed, one that neither of them anticipated. On the 5th day in the hospital, Victor's personal assistant, Cedric, showed up with alarming news. He cornered Helena in the corridor just outside Victor's room. "Miss S." "Langford," Cedric began, voice low. "I've received word from the firm's legal department. They're investigating Victor for potential misuse of company funds." Helena's heart dropped. "What are you talking about?" Cedric shifted uneasily. It seems certain transactions might indicate that Victor was funneling money for personal expenses, possibly related to Miranda. Some are flagged as questionable corporate charges, expensive dinners, hotel bookings under company accounts, that sort of thing. There's talk of the board launching a formal inquiry. A cold dread stabbed Helena's gut. She knew Victor's lifestyle was extravagant, but she'd assumed he kept business and personal finances separate. "What happens now?" she managed. Cedric cleared his throat. "They could freeze his shares, possibly force him out. If the wrongdoing is severe, there could be legal consequences. The board is ruthless when it comes to financial impropriety." Helena closed her eyes. She imagined the scandal, the headlines, the public humiliation. On top of their personal drama, could Victor handle a professional collapse? At that moment, she despised Miranda more than ever for luring him into reckless spending. But she also knew Victor was the one who chose to indulge. After Cedric left, Helena found herself trembling. For years, she'd admired her husband's business acumen, his ability to turn a profit. Now she saw the darker side of unbridled ambition. She forced a calm expression before stepping into Victor's room. He lay propped against pillows, eyes closed, a slight crease on his brow. When Helena told him about the financial investigation, his face went ashen. "I thought I had it all under control," he whispered, guilt weighing on his every syllable. "Yes, I used company funds sometimes to pay for dinners with Miranda. It was easy, no one questioned me. The board trusted me. He paused, struggling. "I was cocky." Helena sank into a chair, heart pounding. "They're threatening to freeze your assets, your shares, possibly more." Victor's eyes flickered with panic. He inhaled sharply, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "I'll fix it. I'll talk to them, pay everything back if I have to. But, oh God, Helena, I might lose everything." Helena bit her lip. "What does losing everything mean to you, Victor? The money? The power? Or are you finally realizing there's more at stake?" He looked at her with watery eyes. "I don't want to lose you," he said, voice trembling. "The rest I'll handle, whatever it takes. But if I can keep you, if we can move past this, maybe that's all that matters now." She studied him for a moment, unsure whether to feel pity or admiration for his abrupt shift. "I want to believe you," she whispered, "but we don't just snap our fingers and pretend none of this happened." Victor nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Then let me earn it. Day by day, I'll come clean to the board. I'll face the consequences. Just don't give up on me, Helena." A hush fell. Outside, a distant rumble of passing traffic echoed, a reminder that life moved on beyond these walls. Inside the hospital room, Helena held Victor's gaze, searching for the truth. She wanted to see if he was genuinely ready to sacrifice his illusions of grandeur for her. She wanted to trust him again, but trust was a delicate tapestry, and right now it was in tatters. Eventually, she slipped her hand into his, pressing it lightly. "I won't leave you," she said, blinking away tears, "but you have to face this. And whatever karma comes your way, you face that too." Victor nodded, his grip tightening around her hand, as though she was a lifeline. Perhaps she was, but the real test would come once they left the controlled environment of the hospital, stepping back into the chaotic swirl of business dealings and media scrutiny. The repercussions of his double life loomed, and the hardest battles were yet to be fought. 1 week after the crash, Victor was discharged from Mount Sinai, still bandaged and walking gingerly. Helena accompanied him back to their penthouse, which felt more like a museum of their past than a welcoming home. The swirl of staff, business calls, and urgent memos bombarded Victor before he even set foot in the door. "Sir, the board meeting is scheduled for Friday morning," Cedric informed him. "They expect an explanation regarding those flagged transactions." Victor nodded, wincing from the pain in his ribs. "Contact my attorney. I'll be there." Helena quietly guided him to the master bedroom, where she helped him settle into bed. Despite everything, she couldn't help feeling a glimmer of sympathy for this man who once stood so tall. He seemed smaller now, battered physically and emotionally. She was painfully aware that the upcoming confrontation could determine their future, both financially and personally. Throughout the week, Victor's legal team scrambled to build a defense. They compiled receipts, relabeled some expenses, argued that certain dinners were genuine business meetings. But a paper trail never lies. The patterns of abuse hotels on weekends, exclusive clubs frequented by Miranda, couldn't be spun as legitimate corporate spending. The best they could hope for was a partial settlement. On Friday morning, Helena dressed in a navy blazer and pencil skirt, determined to support Victor. He donned a tailored suit that concealed most of his bruises, but not the exhaustion etched into his face. They arrived at the glass skyscraper housing his firm's headquarters. The elevator ride up to the executive floor felt interminable. The boardroom itself was all polished wood and panoramic windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Around a long oval table sat the board members, their expressions grim. At the head was Lawrence Chen, chairman and longtime colleague of Victor's. Chen wasted no time, calling the meeting to order with a crisp rap of his knuckles on the table. "Victor," he began, voice cold, "we appreciate you coming in person, especially given your recent accident, but we must address the allegations of misappropriation of company funds. Would you care to explain?" Victor swallowed, standing with a slight wince. Helena sat in a chair behind him, her heart pounding. I take full responsibility," Victor stammered. "I let personal matters interfere with proper accounting protocols. There were expenses that were not strictly business-related." A low murmur rippled among the board members. Victor pressed on. "I'm prepared to reimburse the company for every expense in question. I will also step down from any decisions involving corporate finances until this is resolved." Chen's gaze narrowed. "Do you deny intentionally using company money to fund your personal affairs?" "I can't deny it," Victor replied, voice subdued. "I messed up." Helena noticed a few members shifting in their seats. Some showed pity, remembering Victor as a once brilliant mind who propelled the firm to meteoric growth. Others exuded silent judgment, outraged by his arrogance. "What about the negative press that's sure to follow?" demanded one board member. "We can't afford to have our brand tarnished by scandal." Victor's attorney stepped forward. "Mr. Langford is willing to offer a settlement that covers all misused funds, plus a penalty to demonstrate good faith. We can negotiate terms that keep this matter internal, avoiding lawsuits." Whispered conferrals spread around the table. Finally, Chen raised a hand for silence. "We'll take a short recess," he announced. "Please wait outside." Victor exhaled shakily. Helena grasped his arm, guiding him into the corridor. They found an empty lounge area, sinking onto a leather sofa. "You did what you had to," she said softly, placing a hand over his. "No more lies." He nodded, exhaustion evident in his eyes. "I just hope they don't force me out completely. I've built half my life in that boardroom." After 10 agonizing minutes, Chen summoned them back in. The board had a prepared statement. "We accept your offer to reimburse the company and pay a penalty. In return, we'll not press criminal charges. However, you must resign from your position as CEO immediately. You'll retain some shares, but the controlling stake is forfeit until further notice." A hush descended. Victor's shoulders sagged, relief and sorrow mixing on his face. "Thank you," he managed. "I understand." Chen's gaze softened, if only slightly. "We appreciate your contributions, Victor, but it's best for everyone that we part ways this way." With that, the meeting ended. One by one, board members filed out. Some offered curt nods, others avoided eye contact. Helena guided Victor to the elevator, her mind spinning with the finality of it all. As they stepped out onto the street, the media had already sniffed the story. Photographers snapped pictures, reporters shouted questions, a swirl of camera flashes danced across the grim set of Victor's face. Helena gripped his arm, shielding him with her presence. In the car ride home, they said little. The radio played a subdued jazz tune. It felt like the end of an era. Victor stared at the cityscape slipping by, a tear trailing down his cheek. Helena watched him in silence, remembering how proud and unassailable he once seemed. Now, in losing everything, he might finally be able to see what truly mattered. But the cost was steep, and the repercussions, both emotional and practical, were far from over. Losing the CEO position sent a seismic shock through Victor's world. With no office to go to, no urgent deals to finalize, and no staff at his beck and call, he found himself drifting in a space he didn't recognize. His phone buzzed less often, save for the occasional reporter fishing for a statement or a friend timidly checking in. His once robust social calendar emptied overnight. Meanwhile, Helena grappled with her own emotional whirlwind. While she had promised not to leave him, the weight of betrayal still lay heavily on her heart. She saw Victor's sincerity. In wanting to make amends, he was more attentive, more humble, and he had severed all contact with Miranda. Yet betrayal leaves scars that can't simply be wished away. As for Miranda, she disappeared from their immediate lives. Mutual acquaintances mentioned she'd taken a marketing job overseas, possibly Europe. Helena didn't probe further. She was content that the woman who once overshadowed her marriage was a distant memory now. Still, the damage had been done. Miranda's presence was like a lingering ghost that occasionally haunted Helena's thoughts. Financially, things took a precarious turn. While Victor still had a considerable nest egg, it was locked in legal limbo until the settlement with the firm was paid off. He sold off a few luxury assets, a second penthouse he rarely used, an expensive art collection, even his prized Maserati that had survived as a battered wreck. Each sale felt like a piece of his old identity slipping away. Helena never complained. She'd grown up in a loving but modest household and knew they could live comfortably without the decadent extras. Yet she watched Victor struggle with the humbling process of downsizing. In an attempt to heal and find direction, Helena convinced Victor to join her on one of her charity missions. It was a short trip to a rural area outside of Monterrey, Mexico, where a new school was being built for underprivileged children. Previously, Victor would have scoffed at the idea, citing pressing business matters. Now, with time on his hands and a heart searching for redemption, he agreed. They arrived to find a dusty construction site, rows of cinder blocks, and local volunteers working under the blazing sun. Children ran around barefoot, giggling at the visitors. Helena introduced Victor to the project's coordinators. He tried to hide his discomfort at first, sweat beading on his forehead as he navigated the language barrier and a context far from his usual boardroom elegance. But something unexpected happened. As he spent time helping mix concrete, handing out donated supplies, and seeing the genuine smiles of the kids, Victor felt a sense of fulfillment that was foreign yet strangely uplifting. One little boy clung to him, fascinated by his watch, until Victor unstrapped it and placed it on the boy's wrist for a moment. The boy's eyes sparkled with awe. A surge of emotion caught Victor off guard. He felt tears prickle at the corners of his eyes. Helena, noticing, gently took his arm. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, swallowing. "I'm fine. This is different. It's real." They spent 3 days there, living simply in a modest guest house, sharing local meals, and learning about the village's struggles. Each evening, Helena and Victor would sit outside, the starlit sky arching overhead, sharing whispered conversations about life, regrets, and possibilities. For the first time in a long while, they communicated on a level deeper than small talk or arguments. On the final day, as they prepared to leave, a group of local children ran up to give them handmade cards. Victor held one that read, in shaky handwriting, "Gracias, Señor Victor." Inside was a crayon drawing of a smiling family. He clutched it as though it were more valuable than any stock portfolio he'd ever owned. When they returned to New York, something fundamental had shifted. Helena noticed Victor stepping away from the phone more often, spending more time reading about philanthropic endeavors and inquiring about her non-profit work. He wasn't the cunning financial shark she once knew, and maybe that was a good thing. Rebuilding trust and love would be a journey. They began attending marriage counseling, each session peeling back layers of hurt, frustration, and lingering guilt. Helena found it in her heart to start forgiving, though she maintained firm boundaries. She'd never again tolerate deception. Victor, for his part, committed to transparency, handing over access to his phone, openly sharing his schedule, and ensuring Helena knew every step he took. Karma had struck hard, leaving him physically battered, financially strained, and publicly disgraced. Yet in the rubble of his old life, Victor discovered something that all his money and success had never brought him: a sense of genuine purpose. He poured his energy into a new charitable foundation aimed at supporting educational programs, channeling his business savvy for a cause that aligned more with Helena's world than his old one. Their marriage remained fragile, like a vase repaired after shattering, the cracks always visible, but somehow forging a new kind of beauty. At times, Helena would still see a flicker of regret in Victor's eyes, the heartbreak of losing his old empire and the shame of his affair. But each day brought them a little closer to healing, forging a bond tempered by adversity. In the end, the man who once believed he was unstoppable had been forced to confront his limits. He had chosen his wife over his mistress, facing the storm of consequences that followed. Though the path was littered with shards of his old ego, It also led to a future where he and Helena could stand side by side, wiser, more humble, and perhaps, in a strange twist of fate, stronger than before. Thank you for following the tumultuous journey of Victor, Helena, and the Mistress who nearly shattered their world. From the dizzying heights of New York's elite social scene to the humbling corridors of Mount Sinai Hospital, we saw how one man's choices rippled with consequences: financial ruin, public scandal, and a near-fatal accident that forced him to choose between a momentary fling and the unwavering love of his wife. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, share it with someone who might appreciate the twists and turns of fate, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic tales of loyalty, betrayal, and unexpected redemption. Your support enables us to continue producing in-depth stories that remind us how human resilience can triumph over life's most heart-wrenching setbacks. Stay tuned for more content, and thank you for watching.